Well, hello and welcome to two teachers from C-Street Cooperative Preschool, where I have also taught. And so it's fun to see you guys. We have Heather Swindler and Minou Beling. And today we're going to talk about things that parents should know when you're sending your children off to preschool. And I'm going to start with Heather.
Well, there's a lot for parents to know before they send their kid off to preschool. But one of the things that I think parents are always surprised at and they don't think about very much beforehand um, is that prior to preschool, from the ages of birth to 3, most children's community is their family. And be that as it may, there are a lot of the child can be the center of the family, which is great. It should be, that child should be the center of the family. But it also means that when you play hide and seek, the child always finds, and when they're hiding under a pillow and their feet are sticking out, the parent takes a long time to find them. That you change the rules for a child um, because they need to feel confident in their world. And when a child comes to preschool, their community changes dramatically. Whereas they've been interacting with maybe a sibling and parents and grandparents, they are now interacting with their peers. The group is much, much larger, and the group is much more on the same playing field. And so that creates a situation where you have to learn a huge amount of social interaction clues and skills that you might not pick up just with your family. And it means things, and it's the things that we know about preschool: how to wait your turn. What do you do when it's not your turn? What do you do if someone doesn't want to play with you? How do you get your needs known? How do you find your voice? How do you find your listening ear? How do you listen to what other people are telling you? What do you do when you're frustrated because you don't like what someone else is telling you? These are all things that people have to learn, and preschool is just an amazing place to learn that because the groups are usually small. Everyone's relatively at the same space. They've just come to age 3 where they're starting to learn about other instead of just themselves. And it's a great way to just practice again and again and again how to socialize with other people. And it lays a great foundation for them to then move on um, with their education when they go to kindergarten and first grade. Um, and it's so preschool is not necessarily about prepping for kindergarten by learning your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but how to be part of a community that is bigger than just your family, how to be a productive piece.
So it can be that first big transition from
It's
that family.
huge. It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. Okay. Minu?
I would like to add that
Mhm.
many children I've seen that come to preschool have not heard really the word no before, right? But
Yep.
that's a big part of preschool because you're finally a part of this community, of this group, and there are other children, and they will say, no, I don't want to play with you right now, or I'm, and I think that's a big part that you can practice with your children at home, especially often when it's your firstborn. Children can get really upset when they start preschool and they are not used to having someone know we can't do this right now. Our next step of the day is this, and we are not following your rules because you're our child, right? And then that can be very upsetting for children. And one other thing is often also more with firstborns, probably children often have problems playing on their own. But that is also even that a preschool is a community and there are so many other children. They often at that age in the beginning play on their own because they're not there yet to play as a group. And they often can't do that as good because they are the middle or the focus of the family, and there's always an adult who says, okay, we're going to play tea party now for the next 2 hours, or I'm going to do this with you. So practicing unstructured, unsupervised play.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of change. Um, and Minou, you were saying that children change a lot when they come to school, and that's sometimes a surprise for
Yeah.
parents.
I think they change a lot because it's the first time they're really away from their family, right? It's not the grandma, it's not the grandpa or their siblings, and they become really independent personalities, and they might come home with things you've never thought they would come home with. And those might be new words you're shocked to hear, and you have to explain them. Then other families might use them, but we don't use them. But also just being, your kid might say, no, I can't put my coat on by myself. My teacher taught me how to do it. And then just to let it go as a parent and, support them in that way.
We were talking about things we wanted the parents to know, and I think my biggest thing has always been that a bad day is not it's a good day in many ways, and I know it's upsetting when your child goes off to preschool and something happens. Somebody hit them, somebody, they didn't get their way, they're very upset, their friend said they hate them, they, and those are the moments as teachers that we get to do our job, and really, and to help these children, because we're learning about socialization. We get to help them work through those problems, and you want that to happen in preschool. You want them to be practicing those skills and learning what to do before they go off to kindergarten. And kindergarten teachers are great, and they take the kids where they're at, just like preschool teachers do, but they often don't have the same amount of time for things like that, for some to sit and work through with the two children, right? Because they're forced on certain schedules to do certain things. And so to give your child those opportunities to practice, I think it's really important. And to not think of it as, this was horrible, how could this happen to my child, or if that child is awful, you know next week your child will be the one hitting someone, and we're going to work through that again, because they're frustrated, right? And they do that instead of using their words, and we're going to work through that with the kids involved. So I think sometimes having that perspective, that that's exactly the work that we do at preschool, is important for parents, so it's not um, a terrible emotion. Sometimes it's much more emotional, don't you think, for the parents than the children?
Oh,
Have you
yes.
found that? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Very hard to let go if someone does something to your child, even if, I often, there's one couple families I remember who became best friends, and the kids became best friends. But on one, at the beginning of the school year, there was a little altercation, and it was really hard for one of the parents at first, to think of that child as a good child, no, because they took something away from their child, and their child had no problem working through that and becoming really good friends with this child, because they both like the same things.
Right.
But it's very hard, I think, as an adult, to see your little baby out there being independent. But those are really important things to work through.
And
And
and so much of being independent, and this is true for a lot of different ages, so much of being independent is making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. I'm like, you don't get to learn how to walk without learning how to fall.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I would like to add one thing. I I myself learned as a parent, but also as a teacher, is the separation in the beginning of the
Mm.
school year often is very big, right? And you drop your kid off and it starts crying. And it's hard to leave that moment, to leave your kid in that position crying, because that's maybe also the first time you've done this, right? You normally don't leave your kid crying. And a very good preschool teacher told me once, when I was in that situation, for one thing, he will stop once you're gone. And the
So true.
second thing is, he is doing this to show you that he really loves you.
Yeah.
And I mean, and this is really, it has been with all my kids like this. It has been all the years in preschool like this. And that's something parents really need to know, I think, to make it also easier for the parents to let go at that moment.
It's so true. And I always say that it's not that the emotions the child is feeling aren't genuine,
No.
because sometimes parents think you're saying they're faking, until and they're like, they're not faking. They're not faking. They're feeling that. But once you walk out the door, there's no audience for, I mean, there's no there's no that doesn't help them anymore. And so they know they're there, and usually they sit down and they start playing with someone. And I know many times let someone know right away that your child is already you just left and they're playing with this child. So
Yeah.
interesting. There are cases that can be more difficult, and you work with those individually, but in general, yeah. And I think that's also why a lot of preschools kind of make it, you drop them off and go, um, which is easier maybe for the teachers, but I think it can often put a really hard, for some parents, that is just that can be a non-starter, right? I
Mhm.
mean, I think
Yeah.
C Street is a little different in that parents can actually just stay for the whole day if they wanted to. No, um, but I think working through separation anxiety, it's really nice to find a way to work through that, not just for the child, but for the parent as well. We have any other thoughts on that? That is a big deal. That first time, especially. I remember.
Yeah.
It's hard to spend the rest of your morning productively when you last saw your child in full out tears. And so I think it's important if you can, and we're pretty good about that. But I know different schools and depends. But it's nice if you can know that no, they are actually okay now. But that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. Get used to that. Um, I'm trying to think of other things that are important as you're going into preschool. And obviously a lot of things are handled differently at different preschools. So it's one of the important things is to find out how does talk to the teachers ahead of time. So if your child did something like hit another child, you want to know, how does the school handle that, right? You want to know how they handle certain situations that you might be worried about. So that's really important, talking to the teachers ahead of time. And forming, and we mentioned this a little bit before our interview here, but there are partnerships in the preschool, and
Mm.
the teachers work together, but also the parents and teachers have to work together. And you guys can talk to this too, but in my experience, the times that you have problems are when something happened and the communication wasn't good,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So you want to make sure that you're letting them know when things are and what's happening in school, and oftentimes there's things you need to know from the parents, that if you don't know something's happened at home, or then you don't know why this child is acting out or saying something.
Yeah, I think that's very important, and it can be sometimes very small things for you as a parent, right? But if you have a family where one partner travels a lot, or is gone for a week, that doesn't mean maybe too much for the other partner because it happens all the time. But for the kid, it can be huge, right?
Right.
And so there might, every time, once a month, maybe one of the partners is gone, the kid might have a huge mood swing because of that, because it changes their daily lives, right? And for them more, maybe, I mean, how they feel it, but than for the partner. And I mean, there are much more, severe things, like, I mean, there's a grandma that dies, or sometimes it's just like, oh, we had a car accident. It was not bad, but it was a car accident. Someone, hit us. But it can mean an awful lot to a kid and change how they are that day or for the coming days.
Right. And if you don't know that happened,
Yeah,
then you don't know necessarily why they're doing that particular play at school that day, or why they just said something funny at meeting. And with something as serious as a death in the family, it's important that a parent tells us not just that it happened, but how they handle that at home, so
yeah,
we can keep that in sort of the same the
yeah.
same.
And
Yeah.
we've seen that a lot in the school, also just with things that happened outside of their house, right? Things children see in the news.
Yes.
I remember playing kids for days and days volcanoes, because they did hear there was, a volcano erupted, and you know, and
That's how they process it, and that's great. Yeah.
yeah,
I think most preschool teachers, I actually think most teachers in general want to meet kids where they're at, and they want to help them move forward. But in order to know where a kid is at, and I think this is true especially at the preschool level, um, because you're working so much on social skills and not so much academic skills, that's the basis of where you're beginning. um, you need a really good picture of who they are and what's around them in their life. And so I think that communication piece is just so much more important, because and I would like to throw in communication with the child as well. Just this whole concept of what, I see you're playing with volcanoes a lot. Have you heard or seen anything? Why is this happening? And they'll tell you, or maybe it's something completely different. Maybe they had a dream and that's what they're thinking. It's like, it's so much that communication can go in all different directions to figure out where they're at. What are they trying to process? This processing through play. What is it that they need, that they are working on, that maybe you can help them move forward with it instead of just being stuck in that spot.
and I also in the preschool, like C-Street, where the children are not always with the same teacher, right? It's the
Right.
same between the teachers. I mean, every single thing you see in a kid, you have to communicate to your partner, to your teacher
Mhm.
partner, because it can mean something.
Mhm.
And the other one, the kid.
Even if it's just that child is off today, something
Yeah,
is not,
Yeah,
yeah. Keep it
because
on.
maybe the other teacher knows why. It's like, oh, I forgot to tell you. I know what's
In the morning, the
happening.
parent, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know,
Or one piece of information and one piece of information, like, oh.
your point about communicating with the child, I'm always struck. I remember one instance where a family was divorcing. The parents were divorcing, and they had handled it really well, and they were very amicable. The child was still going to be seeing both parents, or all of those things. This had been a little while, and then all of a sudden there had a week where this child was really upset, and they just assumed it's the divorce and blah blah blah, and that's what we had talked about. But it wasn't until I talked to the child and asked, you seem a little blue today. What's happening? And it turned out the child had been fretting all week because they were about to move, and the child thought that his cat wasn't going with him. he thought moving meant his cat wasn't going with him. And so I told the parents at pickup, and they were like, oh no, of course. That's your cat. That cat goes with you. And but there were assumptions made by well-meaning people all around. Instead of asking him, they just were like, well, of course he's upset because, I almost go to tears thinking about it because it was a rough week. And it was so funny at the end, just going, oh, that's what's going on here.
And I think that brings up another interesting thing about when talking with children and adult eyes and adult comprehension of something versus a children's eyes and a children's comprehension. Often when children ask questions or make a statement, I think there are so many adults, I'm going to just not say parents, I'm going to say adults, who think they know what the child is asking. Yes. And they give an answer that is probably too much information. It's probably too long. It might be frightening, and it's probably going way over the child's head and actually not answering the question that they actually asked. Yep. And that goes for solving problems for them, assuming you just need to talk with them. Like, what are you asking? What do you mean by, I don't know, by a truck? What do you mean by that? And they're like, oh, well, I mean this specific truck and this specific day. And you thought they were talking about some global issue. It can be, yeah.
Yeah, it's really true. And I think parents do tend, especially, there's a lot of hyperbole and things out there nowadays too. And so that things get notched up. And parents tend to make a bigger leap often, or adults, than the child who is simply looking at something very concretely in their world. Yeah, it's true.
For sure.
Well, I love this. I think we hit some really good points about transitioning into preschool and what parents need to think about. Is there anything else either of you feel like we want to mention today? I know.
I always want to advocate for learning through play.
Yes.
That a child, its research has shown again and again and again that children process and they think best and they learn best when they are playing. So, trying to understand volcanoes, a kid's going to play about volcanoes again and again and again. And that is so important to let them do that. That's how they understand the world. And it gives them ownership, and it allows them to just grow in the most beautiful of ways.
And I will tack on to that, especially for you guys and all, to advocate. You're advocating for learning through play, and I'm advocating for professional preschool teachers and licensed preschools. So it's not just play, where we know, in all the training you guys do, it's a lot of work, and figuring out how to best, how do you meet everyone at their level when there's so many different levels, and how does this play of whatever game you're doing, volcanoes or pet shop or whatever you're doing, how do you kind of help meet everybody where they're at and help them to grow in those ways. And I think, as professional preschool teachers, we learn a lot about how to do pre-math skills. So yes, where play and socialization is the most important thing, those other things are happening too, but they're happening through that gateway of play. And it takes a lot of work to learn how to do that. And I think sometimes, especially, in a co-op school where parents come in and work as assistant teachers, they might, many do appreciate it and know it, but I think sometimes adults look at the school and like, oh, they're playing a grocery store game and they're whatever, and don't necessarily see how they're grouping things and doing pre-math skills and how they're doing language skills and how they're, all these things are happening and how they're learning to work together. Anyway, so I think that there's a big difference between a play date and going to a school with professional teachers.
I agree.
And all this learning through play, really, and what the teachers do and how to promote the learning through play during the day is really one of the things a preschool can do and should do to get the kids kindergarten ready, right? It's not the worksheets. For me, it's not the worksheets. It's really working through problems during the day, and if that the problem is the pet shop and how to solve the problem that we have one dog and three kids, that is getting ready for kindergarten.
Yeah, and so there's another example of like there's sharing, and but this is kind of a math problem or a spatial problem. I was watching these two kids play, and they had created a platform, but the top layer was flat, but it was based on a slanted object. And they kept trying to put things on it and they kept sliding off. But they kept looking at the top one and thinking, it's flat, it should be okay, not realizing that it was based on something slanted. And instead of stepping in and saying, you need to fix it like this, looking at their problem and saying, what's the problem? Why do you think it's doing that? How can you fix it? And they got there eventually, but it took them a solid 15 minutes to figure it out. And that's the difference. Like, instead of just like, oh, I got it, you just plop that up like that. We're good to go. Continue your play. It's like, I wanted them to do more than just play. I wanted them to look carefully about what was happening because they were a little frustrated.
And then they really understand it because they figured it out.
Right.
And I will steal a similar one. It's from you, Heather, for working with children, where we were talking about pre-geometry, and it was those little magnet tiles, and they were out of squares. And you patiently waited and watched and were like, gee, we need another square. Is there any other way we can, and somebody figured out, if I put the two triangles together, I have a square. It is those things. It's knowing when to wait and when they need a little more information, or what questions to ask, I think is a really good way to put it.
Yeah. And that's the difference between a play date and preschool.
There you go. It's down to triangles and squares.
But I think it's asking the right questions, because it gets back to when things don't go right, that's when you learn.
Yeah.
And I think if you have three other kids in your house and you're trying to make lunch for all of them and you hear a squabble, and it's easier in that moment to fix the problem so that you can get on with the 12 other tasks you are trying to accomplish as a parent, because that's always the case, instead of helping them work through it. And that is one of the biggest advantages and purposes of preschool, is how to work through the social and the other stuff.
Yeah, I found it often that as a teacher, it's often stepping away from it and just stepping in when it's really needed, right? And not stepping in always into what's happening there, just stepping back, watching, and being there to support them in the right direction, but not fixing the things for them.
Well, I think this has been a really great discussion, and I appreciate you joining me today. And I think we'll close on that note. So again, thank you so much, teachers.
Thank you.
C-Street Cooperative Preschool, and look forward to seeing you soon.